Hi, it's Jessie. Today I am drinking Tuscan Dreams from Tea Fiore. There will be a review linked if you are interested in seeing my thoughts on this tea, and I'm just gonna get right into things for today because it's a wrap up and those always take forever. So let's start right in at August, which is where you would expect me to start because that's where I left off. In August, I read 13 books total. They had an average page count of 279 pages, or I read an average of 117 pages per day. The average rating for books in the month was 3.3 stars. This month is when I started implementing my new rating system, so you might see some changes in my overall rating, but I'm still gonna group them in my graphic by full star categories for this year just to kind of keep things consistent. But most of them are going to actually fall somewhere in between. So first, Dark Matter, Lord of the Flies, This Is Where It Ends, Ready Player One, The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie, and Will's Red Coat were all from my summer reading vlog. I read a bunch of my students' favorite books. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. I wish I liked more of the books. Anyway, check out that full vlog. It's a little bit long, but I also read 16 books, so if you're interested in that, that'll be there. Next, I read The Color Purple, The Circus Rose, and Green Glass House, all for the Newt readathon, technically speaking. I did read them, I just didn't vlog it or do a wrap up for it or anything because I really just wasn't feeling it. I just didn't, I don't know, it's been a long year and August was a weird month. So my thoughts on those. The Color Purple is a classic about, it's hard to kind of explain. It's mostly about Celie's evolving relationship with God, but it's also about her relationship to the people around her, her relationship to herself, her relationship to men. It's very complex, and I really, really enjoyed it. One of the reasons I read this was some friends of mine in college were trying to do a book club. We haven't read a book since August. And we got to talk about it, and it was actually really nice to go that in depth about it because I think I liked it more having shared those thoughts and heard what other people were thinking about it and things. It did, I will warn you, it's written in vernacular. It's a little hard to get into. For me anyway, it took a long time to get used to the style, but once you kind of get into it, it reads really easily and it was just beautiful and poignant. Next was The Circus Rose. So I picked this up because it was a queer Rose Red and Snow White retelling that took place at a circus. That's a fairy tale I have read. I have read Rose Red and Snow White, but it's not one I'm super familiar with. It's not one that I read a ton growing up. And this is about Ivory and Rose, who are twin sisters with different fathers, raised by their mother in her circus. And we see them grow up a little bit, and then things really start to take off when they are outside of the city and people start to go missing. In retrospect, this is probably one of those cases where I rated this book too highly because I was just super hype about the queer rep. It was a cute story and fun, but honestly, overall very thin. The plot just wasn't really there. And yeah, there's a couple of time jumps in it that I kind of wish we hadn't gotten. I wish we'd gotten more of that time filled in. So looking back on it, it's not a story that I'm going to remember really. Next, I read Green Glass House. This is a middle grade mystery. It's about a young boy who lives in an inn, which is used for smugglers. And he's expecting a nice quiet winter because smugglers don't really work in the winter when it's cold and things. But then a bunch of people start showing up and he's joined by this young girl who tries to solve this mystery when people's things start going missing. This was cute. That's really all I can say about it, was that it was cute. There were some fun twists and some predictable twists, and overall it was just sweet. So that leaves 4 books left in the month of August. First up, White Fragility. This is one you've probably heard of. I didn't rate it because I'm kind of trying to not rate nonfiction anymore because it's so subjective. But this is a book specifically about understanding racism from the white lens and allyship. It's about it's been making its rounds this summer and I finally got the loan from the library. It's about really why white people don't really engage with anti-racist ideas, or why white people get so defensive when you call them out on being racist. You might have already heard this because I'm way behind the curve here, but it's a really good introduction to racial injustice and how to engage. There wasn't much I hadn't already read somewhere else, but it was good. One of the things that made me want to pick this up was because one of my courses over the summer, we read the essay White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, and I was like, wow, this is really, really good, so I want to read more, but I really feel like I got out of that essay everything I could, and the rest of the book didn't really add anything to it. I do still recommend it for a lot of other white people that are just kind of starting their anti-racist journey, but if you're already past that point, I don't think it's the most useful. And then the rest of the books that I read this month were all 4 stars, which, given the average rating, was one of my lowest average ratings for the month. Really, really tells you what I thought of the books my students read. Anyway, so Sorcerer of the Wild Deeps. This is a novella about a troop of soldiers defending a merchant's caravan as they travel, and it's specifically about the captain of that crew and the physician of that crew, who both have God's blood in them. It's told all from the physician's point of view about the captain, kind of. There's kind of a romance. I don't know. I absolutely loved A Taste of Honey by Kayashante Williams when I read it last year, and I was really looking forward to this one because I loved A Taste of Honey so much, but it kind of fell short. One thing was reading it on ebook was taking me forever, which is interesting because I haven't had that problem with a lot of the other novellas I've read on ebook. I have that problem with full-length novels, but ebooks I tend to get through on ebook all right. So I switched to the audiobook and it did go better, but well, I really just don't know what actually happened in this book, which isn't terrible, right? Like, I don't mind coming out of a book confused, but I think the reason I was confused here was because I just wasn't engaged and I wasn't paying attention. But it was good. Like, for all that I'm saying, I still really enjoyed it. It was a 4-star read. I want to reread it because I'm still confused. Next was The Fire Within by Chris Delancey. This is the first book in the Last Dragon Chronicles, which is a series I read as a child. It's kind of the counterpoint to the Inheritance Cycle in my YA middle grade series thing, which will progress whenever I finish The Last Dragon Chronicles. I will eventually have a full series review for that, so I don't want to spend too much time on it now. But the concept is that David, this young college student, moves into the penny kettle. I just realized that's the first time I've said penny kettle out loud, and it's hard to say. Anyway, he moves into the penny kettle house, which as a tenant, and the mom and the daughter that run the house make these little clay dragons that maybe a little bit more than meets the eye. As interesting as that may sound, I will warn you that the first book is really, really about squirrels, not about dragons, but it's important to the full series plot, believe it or not. This is one I read as a child, like I said, and nostalgia definitely made me like this more than I probably would have if I had picked it up for the first time today. But it's really cute and really sweet, definitely good for younger children, like that 8, 9, 10, 11 age range. If you're at all interested in that, if it sounds interesting, stick around. I promise there will be a full series review before this time in 2021. Next was The Tea Dragon Society. This is a graphic novel that was originally published as a webcomic about a young girl learning how to raise tea dragons, which are, well, what the name implies. They're teeny little dragons that grow tea leaves. It was cute. I read it as the graphic novel, or I read it as the webcomic because I really wanted to read it. And it was cute. It's not complicated. It's not totally crazy. It's just really sweet. I want to read more from the series, and hopefully later installments have more of a story to them. But this was cute. So September was a bit of a slower month for me, or rather it was an average month before this year where I suddenly started reading a ton. I read 7 books in September with an average rating of 3.5 stars, an average page count of 420 pages, so a long average page count, but it still came out to about 98 pages per week. First up, not the Royal Assassin, Assassin's Quest is the third and final book of the Farseer trilogy, so check out my series review, which has been done. if you want to know my thoughts on that. I will say that this was my favorite of the trilogy because it really expanded the world just so much, and it felt a lot more action filled. There was a lot less just time passing, everyday things. Also, it had so much of the Fool in it, and I love them so much. So anyway, check out the series review if you want to know my full thoughts. I also finished Icefire. That's the second book in the Last Dragon Chronicles. I'll save my thoughts for that for the review whenever it comes. We'll say this is when the series actually starts to get more exciting and be about dragons. And then I started the Memoirs of Lady Trent series, which starts with the Natural History of Dragons. A full review of that series will come up once I finish the final book, which I'm almost done with. But for now, just know that I really, really loved this book, and every book after gets even better. I said this in another video recently, but think about Jane from Tarzan. That era, the like Victorian era, and she wants to become a naturalist rather than just following with her father, but instead of gorillas, it's dragons. I think that's the best I can give you for a description of this, but it's a Victorian woman becoming a naturalist, and it feels like it. It feels like we're actually reading a natural historian's memoirs. It doesn't feel like a fantasy novel. So that's gonna work for some people and not work for others. I'll talk about this more in a review that should be coming probably, give it 2 months. So then the rest of the books in order. I did DNF a nonfiction book this month to start. So The Pity of It All is about the complex dynamic about Jewish Germans or German Jews. And I read everything but the last chapter of this because the last chapter gets into the more modern history that I already am really familiar with, and I didn't think this book was going to add anything to my understanding of that time. I do think this book has a really interesting and valuable perspective, and there's a lot of really good information in this, but it also was very biased, like any history book you read will be, but it was very obviously biased in a way I don't necessarily disagree with. So keep that in mind if you want to pick this up, but if you're somebody that's into Jewish history or German history, I think this is worth picking up. I think it was interesting. Moving on, I had a one-star, I had a single one-star book this month, and that was The Dunwich Horror by H.P. Lovecraft. I wanted to give Lovecraft's work a chance because I am interested in horror as a genre, and I always think it's good when you get into a genre to explore some of the origins of it. And I also want to read some of those works that were more directly influenced by Lovecraft, like Lovecraft Country. And so I like to read the original first before I get into it. Like, Lovecraft is a horrible person. We know this. He's racist. He was racist even by the values of the time he was in. He's classist. He's just terrible. And I thought, surely his books can't be that bad. If his books had that vibe in them, they wouldn't be so popular, right? I was wrong. The town this one in particular takes place in is a very closed-minded and corrupt and stupid, full of just stupid people, and they're all stupid because they're poor and inbred, and the way Lovecraft writes it, those two are synonymous. If you're poor, you're inbred, and then you're stupid. And that's just, And then of course the villain of the story, so to speak, was just happened to be a person that has a wide mouth and a large nose and big ears and I don't know, maybe he could at least be a little subtle in his racism. So I didn't care for that. I'm going to give him another shot, but really I don't care enough at this point. I feel like I can say I've checked Lovecraft off the list of authors I've read and can move on. So nothing in the 2-star category, and then I had one additional 3-star book, which was Smoke and Beers by Neil Gaiman. This is a short story collection that I picked up kind of hoping for something spooky or scary. I know Neil Gaiman does horror, but the only horror I've read from him was Coraline, which admittedly is one of the scariest books I've ever read, and The Sandman graphic novel, so I was hoping to get more of that, and this one was just weird. I wouldn't say it was scary. There were a couple kind of creepy stories, but it was mostly just weird and very sexual in a way I was just not expecting. There were a couple of good moments. Like there was one story about a backpacker going through Europe, and he stumbles upon this like quaint Lovecraftian town, but just like doesn't believe it. He's like, these people are weird going on. But a lot of it was just unremarkable. The only other story that distinctly sticks in my mind is about a guy that keeps seeing the same model in his Playboy magazines throughout his life, but she never gets any old. Again, that's the weird sexual side of that thing. So I don't remember that much of it, and what I do remember, it was just kind of weird. And that was everything this month. Like I said, it was a bit of a shorter month for me.